Welcome to Zeros and Ones, a podcast about philosophy, ancient wisdom, and the meaning of life. Here is your host, Becca Thompson.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our amazingly beautiful, super terrific podcast. I woke up. I just was so tired. I don't know if the rest of you are feeling this way on the global scale, the way that I am. I don't know about you, and we're gonna get into this. I feel all the things, like it gets in my body. Which again, like I said, we're gonna talk about what that is and what that means. And when a person departs from the ruts and routines that are kind of laid out for us as human beings. We live our lives in tracks, and I mean tracks like a wagon tracks going over the mountains, right? Let's say in years of old, right, and there are still some really cool footpaths by the river in Minneapolis here in Mississippi, from the Dakota, the Indian tribe that was predominantly here, footpaths that would go through the woods by the river. That was the walking path, right? So as humanity ventures into new spaces, I don't know if you've been to the Cumberland Gap. I have been a few years ago. It was really cool. And you can see the old, I was running through there and I was thinking of Daniel Boone, and I was like, it was Daniel Boone, right? That went through the Cumberland Gap. And I was like, this is pretty crazy that like he and the people he went with carved this out. And then everyone else followed along. And the game that I played as a child, Oregon Trail, the Oregon Trail, that was because that was the way that people got out there, right? To the far west. And Route 66 was itself first a trail before it got paved. That's why it became so famous. But when you're the person hacking the trees and creating the trail, it's much more exhausting than being on the trail in the ruts. And the reality is, I think a lot of our society, this is a podcast on philosophy, and I promise we're going to get into our topic of the day pretty soon. But so many people they get into the ruts because they're told that's how to get to the promised land. But they don't even know what the promised land is, except for maybe a 401k and time with your grandkids. I don't know. I never bought into that. I never could get myself to do it. And I have studied a lot of things, and people have always tried to get me to do this. And it is just innate in me. And I'm going to share a little bit about me before we get into our topic today. And our topic today is my expertise which is arithmetic, if I'm being plain. And that is that when I was a baby, you hear lore as to how it all started, but I was throwing up something called black bile, which will sit in our stomachs. But because I did that as a baby, and I had I wasn't throwing up black bile yet. I had a secretion coming out of my umbilical cord, or my belly button, which was my umbilical cord. I know you're probably like, this is gross. Do I have to click the box now that I talked about things on the podcast that are unsavory? This is life, though, people. And I was a baby. So there's a secretion coming out of my belly button. My mother gets nervous. She takes me to the hospital. My father was in residency at the time. He was a medical student, and now he's an MD of 40 plus years, 50 years. And the doctor chose to put me under the knife at 11 months old, only to discover there was nothing wrong. And then when they put me back together, that's when something went wrong. And then I needed a second surgery or I was going to die. But this is the logic of the medical professionals in the world. Trust me, I've had a lot of therapy, and there have been a lot of tears and a lot of yelling. That's probably why my voice is the way that it is. Over this whole, my old furniture, I love it. I can tell you about it, but it creaks and croaks. It's not the best for podcasts. But so you have these the medical professionals are claiming that you should be some type of way. Well, they cut me open and almost killed me. And I'm going to tell you, like, I was 11 months old, but I remember to a degree. Again, I've had a lot of therapy. I've had a lot of, I don't know about you guys, there's this book called The Body Keeps the Score, which I think is really wonderful. And I've done a lot of like memory therapies, right, to try to figure out what that was over the years. We don't need to go into this. We're talking about arithmetic today, but this is a philosophy podcast. But just discovering like the amount of things that I did in fact remember. And so when you have that, and then people try to get you to follow the rut of the Oregon Trail, you're like, okay, I'll go to the Pacific Ocean, but I'm going to blaze my own trail. I'm Lewis and Clarking this thing. So that has become what I am. And so to me, the ultimate Louisiana Purchase trail, Northwest Passage is the free passage of your mind. And so that is why I, as your humble host, have learned all these things, because I cannot handle, as a person, I want to know everything. Okay, I'm just telling you how we got here. So our quote for today, we start everything with a quote. And our topic today is arithmetic. Is from Carl Friedrich Gauss, and Gauss was, I honestly, like, I mix up all the things that he did because he was so brilliant. Gauss was a mathematician, and yes, I'm drinking coffee, and I will be, so you can be hearing it on that other side of the thing. Maybe I'll cut it out. Okay, here we go. Carl Friedrich Gauss. Mathematics is the queen of science, and arithmetic is the queen of mathematics. So that's Gauss. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is arithmetic, and honestly, probably one of my favorite topics. And the reality is school children everywhere, when you say, and even adults everywhere, if they say they don't get math, air quotes, it's because you are outsourcing your brain's knowledge on arithmetic to a calculator. And a lot of teachers encourage that. This is me on my high horse. I'm on a high horse right now on a big, tall podium, and I'm preaching, okay? I promise I won't be preaching for all this, but if you know your multiplication tables, if you know how to add, if you know how to count, you can do everything. And it is truly, literally the building blocks of everything. So let's talk about arithmetic. Remember, ick means of or pertaining to. Okay, and Gauss did so much about number theory, which allowed us to be able to have computers, which allows me to talk in my dining room on my old Ethan Allen table that was my grandmother's. And you are wherever you are listening to it. It is because of the number theory of the zeros and ones that Carl Gauss and his contemporaries figured out, that then subsequent people took it and ran. And now we've got this computer, and I've got this amazing Yeti microphone, and you upload into the digital spheres in a place like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and then here we are. Okay. That is because of arithmetic. Thank you very much. This podcast, I call it Zeros and Ones, but I have a book coming out. It's coming around Christmas, called One, the Biography of All Things, that everything leads back to itself. So the old Greek word arithmos means simply number. Okay, so arithmetic is pertaining to numbers. Okay, over pertaining to numbers. So we are forced to say, well, what is a number, right? I'll just tell you, I am an expert in this. I already, it's impossible to start talking about arithmetic while I'm speaking without talking about my own personal journey. So I already told you the story of my surgery, and that set me back again as just a person. I came out of that incredibly sick, and it took me years to physically get back to whatever, and emotionally far, far, far longer. And one of the things, when I was really young, we moved, and I didn't understand the accent. I was trying to learn to read, and I have an older sister, and she's absolutely brilliant. Also a doctor, medical doctor. And my mother was nervous, and she handed me flashcards for adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing, and I took it and ran. And so it is very difficult for me to even consider a world where I don't comprehend arithmetic, because I was very young. I was very, very young. There are people I've heard forever that say that they don't get math, right? And Pythagoras, yes, Pythagoras, that guy, he gets credited for this theorem, but Pythagoras was so much more than that. Pythagoras is definitely a hero of mine. Pythagoras, along with like Lewis and Clark. Who else is on the docket way up high? I mean, there's some. Well, Queen Elizabeth. I mean, the OG. You know what I'm saying? William Shakespeare. There's some great thinkers. Aristotle, Socrates, but Pythagoras for me is like Pythagoras. So he always said all is a number, and I agree with him. You know, I think it's. I have to say this other quote. Of another person that I have found to be deeply illuminating in my life, and that is C.S. Lewis, Clive Stearns Lewis. If you don't know who that is, he's a Christian apologist, and actually he very famous one post World War II, and he became an apologist actually because of another person you may have heard of, James Ronald Rule. Is that the R.R. Tolkien? Okay, so Tolkien, of course, wrote The Lord of the Rings. And then he was a believer in the Christian faith, and he invites Lewis to be a part of it. They had a group of people who would come together and chat, and just, it sounds sublime. You would just chat about philosophy and life and linguistics and theology, and I believe they called themselves the Entings, but I'm positive there's some Lord of the Rings really uber nerd, and I say nerd in the most beautiful way possible, who is correcting me right now. They're like, it was not the Entings, but I'm pretty sure it was the Entings was the name of their group. But so C.S. Lewis said about Christianity once, he said, I believe in Christianity as I believe in the sun, that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but by it I see everything else. And I agree with that in many ways. And then also I have to say, that's how I view number. That's how I view number, truly. Because when you start to see in the zeros and ones, when you start to think in the zeros and ones, it takes some doing. You know, you have to wake up every morning. That's probably why I'm tired. Wake up every morning with a stern intention to do just that. But yeah, it's just, when you start to see it, it's so difficult to toe the party line. I was working in a school last year, and, you know, not only were there square walls and bells and no windows and bad HVAC and a capricious principal who wants to tell you what to do, and everybody's running around. You know, teachers, we think we're a little bit saviors of the world, and I say we. I'm not immune to that. But there was a level to it that I'm very Charlie Chaplin, and I don't want to be part of a group that would have me for a member. That is on point. But so when you start to think that way, you really struggle. A person really struggles to be part of the regular world that we've set up here in our society, which, again, we were talking about ethics and the mores and the customs, right? And there are a lot of customs in our society, especially Western civilization at the moment. When I went to Africa a couple of years ago, I was in Tanzania to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and we flew in at night, and as we're going from the airport, the Kilimanjaro airport, into Moshi, Tanzania, it's about a 45-minute drive, and you're just seeing people working with heavy machinery in the dark, and I remember thinking, do they do this because it's just so hot during the day? And I actually think that's the truth. But it was just such a bizarre thing to literally see like sparks flying out of the darkness, because there are no street lamps, but you've got your, you know, working on your motorcycle so that you can, you know, make a living at a tap the next day. It's fascinating. Okay, so all is number. Like, please put that in your mind. All is number. Pythagoras was not wrong. You might not get that right now, but that is the truth. Okay? So we're going to do some thought exercises as we do this. And I want to ask you something, if you ever read Choose Your Own Adventure. And I actually haven't told you my very first memory. I told you what happened to me with the surgery, but that wasn't my first memory. I had to do some, you know, therapeutic memory exercises to remember those things, but I did have a memory. So in choose your own adventure, we're going to choose our own adventure. Okay. I want you to try to come up with your first memory. Okay. Your first memory. So my first memory, my sister actually, as I said, I have an older sister. She just the other day said that her first memory is actually sitting on the floor in the hospital when I was in surgery as a baby. So I was 11 months old. She was barely 2. But my first memory was sitting in a high chair with her, probably shortly after this, looking down at a tray of like squishy food, right? I believe it was squash or peas or something. And my mother was feeding both of us whilst on the phone. I remember these weird things that you remember. And my sister looked at the food as well and took squash off of the tray or the cup or whatever it was in and smashed it in my face. And that was the memory. And I remember even thinking, oh, she's going to feed me now, because my mother had gotten up to take a phone call, as I said. So I want you to think of your first memory. So pause this if you need to. What is your very first memory? Okay, everyone's is going to be different. According to my sister, hers was sitting on the floor coloring in a hospital room when I was sick. And mine was shortly thereafter, because we're close in age, shortly thereafter having her push squash in my face. Okay? So consider it, and I would even argue maybe write it down, okay? And you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with number, okay? And that's the key, okay? We're thinking together, right? Okay? My memory of the squash and your memory, if you haven't gotten it yet, pause right now and come right back. Okay, I'm going to guess that everybody has it now, okay? My memory of thinking that my sister was going to feed me and then squishing the squash in my face. Like, oh, that's not what she was going to do, right? I'm having memory of a thought. And you might think, well, what's the big deal about that? Because everything is mind. Everything. Thinking is number. Remembering is thinking is number. What is actually happening when you remember? And I mean this. We talk about science. People have bumper stickers. I believe the science. Oh, really? What does that mean? Tell me what that means. We're going to go back to this pretty much in every episode. You have the people that say, I believe the science, and then you have other people who will quote a Bible verse at you. What is the synergy of this? What does that mean? What does that mean? So, a thought is something, and a memory of a thought is so meta. I mean, are you with me with this? Okay, so Pythagoras is one of my heroes, who said that all is number, and Pythagoras had a hero. Hermes Trismegistus. Who has heard of Hermes Trismegistus before? Hermetic wisdom. A lot of deep thought, ancient philosophy is from Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes. Okay? If you do a Google search on Hermes, and feel free, but if you're driving, please pull over before you use your phone. Although I will admit I'm guilty. You didn't catch me in the act of trying to look things up while I'm driving. Usually I'll hand the phone to my son. But so Hermes Trismegistus, you're going to get a lot of things. You're going to get about his hermetic wisdom and a phrase, as above, so below. That might be to Hermes. And he's credited with all his mental and the 7 laws of wisdom, which I actually need to write those down if I'm going to be talking about this stuff, because I don't have it down at the present. But so it's the idea, if A is B and B is C, then A is C, okay? And this is going to deeply get into what we're talking about in the logic, okay? So I'm writing things down because I don't want to forget. Of wisdom, because I realize I didn't write those down. So if A is B and B is C, then A is C. Okay? We have to know that. So Pythagoras says all is number, and Hermes Trismegistus says all is mental. So if all is number and all is mental, then number is mental, is thinking. QED. So Rene Descartes, hopefully you guys have heard of Descartes before, because if you've ever used maps on your phone, you can thank Rene Descartes. Okay, let's talk about iterations from Descartes' name alone. Descartes, Cartesian coordinates. If you are a kid, or you were a kid, you have children in algebra, they're learning about Cartesian coordinates and Cartesian plane. Cartography is mapping. Where did all these words come from? They came from Rene Descartes' name, because Rene Descartes came up with the coordinate system. Well, Pierre de Fermat, I actually did a silly video on that years ago. Pierre de Fermat claimed he did too. And they had a real battle. They're both French. That's why the slope of a line, M, is it's short for a French word, and I always forget it. It's like meridien. But that's why it's an M. Kids everywhere are y, y equals mx plus b, right? Why is it an M? Well, it's because of that. And Descartes. Okay, so Descartes was a mathematician and a philosopher and a lawyer, because that trifecta was kind of like the thing you did back in the day. I don't know why I keep switching my chair. So mathematician, philosopher, and lawyer, because that's how people didn't, much like me now, people didn't make money as a mathematician. There weren't universities that were propping this up. There weren't universities that were paying for research. That's a new thing. Everybody had their since the dawn of time until a few hundred years ago in the United States university system and European university system, everything art or science related had a benefactor. Every single thing. Leonardo da Vinci's was the Medicis, which we're going to get into later, because that's incredibly problematic. Galileo's were the Medicis too. And that's incredibly problematic when the Medicis were also family with the Pope. And then, do you know the link between Galileo and the church? Okay, so we're going to get to that, but it's problematic. So Descartes didn't, as far as I know, which I'm going to say pretty certainly he did not, have a benefactor. But at this point in time, that's how he made his money being a lawyer. And then he studied, and so did Pierre de Fermat, and Fermat is fun, So Descartes, I can't state enough about him, but he said, cogito ergo sum. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Okay? I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. And I want to just unpack that for a second, because do you see the wordplay? So translate it in your mind. The English is I think, therefore I am. Cogito, I think. Ergo, therefore, sum, I am. Cogito ergo sum. Sum is the I am. Okay? We're going to get into language in a different episode, but sum, sum, addition, arithmetic, arithmos, number. Okay? You might say I'm a dreamer. Okay. So when you think of, we're going to do another exercise. When I say two, what comes to mind? You might immediately say, well, two what? And therein you've exposed the truth of what I'm trying to say. Picture two. Maybe you see a glyph, the glyph, the hand script that we use for the number two in your mind. Okay? But is that two? Is the Hindu Arabic glyph two? What if we used a Roman numeral or Mayan counting? Perhaps you have hash marks. What is two? What is three? What is 1? Okay. Sum. Sum is to add. All mathematics is counting. Okay? All mathematics is counting. There is just 1. In the first chapter of the first book of Genesis, it talks about light, which we're going to get into. And I would tell you that all of everything is just numbers. Everything is just 1. I feel like I'm losing my mind with the phone ringing. So what is 1? And 0 would be, of course, the partner to 1. So we can't talk about arithmetic without talking about 0. So we currently have 10 glyphs that we use for counting. 10. Okay? And before you ask why, I would just tell you to look at your hands for a second. Okay? So we have a glyph for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we have a glyph of 0. Okay? Because when we combine the 1 and the 0, we get 10, and we're going to get to that special number. But so 0 is something of the absence of something. Okay? And bluntly, people have died over proving the existence, that the absence of something is itself a thing. Okay? Yep. Okay? So I want to save for you in my book, because I'm kind of looking at the outline of my book as we go through some of these things. I want to save for you some of the fun of the lore of the numbers. Okay? But I'll just read off a little bit about some numbers, okay? There is 1. There is the absence of 1. There is 2, which is 2 ones. 2 is duality. 2 has 1 with a partner. It is the darkness and the light, the yin and the yang, the up and the down. 3, a chord of threefold cannot be broken. 3 is the father and mother and child, the day and the night and the eclipse, the soul and the mind and the body. 3 sees itself. 4 is 2 twos. The 1 and the 1 and the 1 and the 1. 3 and the 1, the 4 is the prism. 4 is dimensionality. 4 is up and down and left and right and backwards and forwards and counting. 5 is divine. 5 cannot be split fairly. 5 fingers and 5 toes, and a pentagon is an eternally looping pentagram. 6 sex sick. 6 is 6 threes and 2 twos. 2 threes and 3 twos. 6 is 6 ones. 6 is the male and the female. 7 is divinity. 7 systems in the body, 7 stars in the heaven, 7 days of the week, 7 wandering stars, 7 cannot be divided. 8 is infinity, hidden in plain sight. 2 pairs of 2 pairs. 9 divine, 9 rings, the Nazgul, the followers. And then we get to this thing after the glyphs have been exhausted, which is a 1 and a 10, which the ancient Hebrews called that number Yod. So, I think we're going to give this 2 episodes talking about arithmetic, because we're at 30 minutes, and I think I just rattled off a lot of craziness to you, and yet it's just numbers. And it is true that the Hebrew word for the number 10 is Yod. And I just want you to sit with that, because we're going to talk about language in a different episode. These words didn't come from nothing. Have you ever played the game telephone as a child? Have you ever had someone mispronounce your name, right? You introduce yourself and they say it incorrectly. Now, I have kind of a common name, but I can't tell you how many times I'll say, "Hi, my name is Becca," and they'll go, "Becky?" And I say, "No." But the reason for that is because people are jumping. They hear the first part, right? And they're used to it finishing a certain way. Well, how many times has it happened over the existence of human beings? I'm sorry, I struggle to believe that everything is just purely the way that it is. So the number 10 is Yod. All is number, all is mental. Pythagoras and Hermes Trismegistus. Let's talk more about arithmetic tomorrow. We're going to talk about, or in our next episode, we're going to talk about Hippasus. Don't let me forget about Hippasus and the Pythagoreans. Okay, thank you so much for stopping in. I really appreciate you listening. I'm going to try to have polls at every podcast to see if people just want a second topic. So we're going along the outline of my book, one, the biography of all things, and hopefully I can convince you that actually everything is the same thing, and it is one. And that includes us. That includes us. That includes us. Our physical bodies, our mental spirits, all of it, which I haven't even, maybe you heard me rattle off about 3. Body, mind, spirit, body, mind, soul. Some people separate those, some people don't. There's a guy named Sadhguru. I don't know if you, and it's an ancient teaching, but he's the one that I heard it from, is that you can meditate breathing, and you just say, I am not the body. I'm not even the mind. And when you go there, that's a real, like, what just happened? All right. Thank you so much for stopping in. My name is Becca Thompson. It is my life's mission to help the world get out of this cloud, and so that they can enjoy each other, enjoy this beautiful earth, respect and love children and the elderly, the vulnerable, and animals, and that we get our bodies back into grounding with this beautiful place we call home. That's it for today. I will see you the next time. Doo-doo-doo.
Thank you so much for listening to Zeros and Ones with Becca Thompson. Please subscribe and share.